Grab your spears, raise your tomahawks, Seminole fans. You're listening to The Warpath, the weekly collaboration between theosceola.com and warchant.com. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer for the Osceola, joined as always by Matt Lasser, recruiting writer for Warchant. Welcome to the show, and it's a good show that we have for you all today. We're going to be touching a lot of different places, checking a lot of different boxes. We have Blake Alderman from Gators Online going to talk to us about a very close rival that you know well and hate vehemently, the Florida Gators. He's going to touch on Billy Napier, kind of what's going on with that recruiting class right now, and who, if anybody, Florida State could be making a move with off of that commitment list if things continue to go poorly for University of Florida. And then, of course, maybe not necessarily a direct rival on the football field, but definitely a recruiting rival right now for Florida State. We're going to have Justin Wells with Inside Texas, a Texas Longhorn, to come and talk about some recruiting battles that Florida State and Texas are about to get into, if not in already. But once again, thank you so much for joining the show. Nick Carlisle, Matt Lasser. Matt, how has your week been, and are you excited to go on a little vacay this weekend? Where are you headed?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to New York for the Ryder Cup. We are pre-recording on Wednesday this week because I'm leaving early, like at 6:30 a.m. out of Tallahassee Airport on Thursday morning to get up to New York for the Ryder Cup. I'm really excited. For people who for New York Noles, I'm going to try. I think I've heard Wicked Willie's is the place to go watch games. Keep in mind, I'm going to the Ryder Cup on Friday, so I will be in a state, to put it lightly. So we're going to try to make it to Wicked Willie's for the UVA game to watch it. If anyone's going to be there, feel free to say hi. So I'm really excited. I'm only going to be there 48 hours, but it should be fun. And I'm making you do all the work for me. So
yes, you are. It's, to be fair, you've done 2 weeks in a row. It's my turn to pick up the mantle here. Before we do get into the show today, we do want to introduce you to a new sponsor of our show, Andy Ludicky from MyPerfectFranchise.net. Are you sick of your job? Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race? Do you want to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Or do you have a job? Matt, I know you and I have jobs and want a side hustle. Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and he helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, their passions, and their financial requirements. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you. If you have any questions about business ownership, he loves college football, so that conversation would be a lot of fun. Tell him where you're from and who you support. Head to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more. You can text or call Andy at 404-973-9901. Again, that's 404-973-9901. Once again, thank you to Andy and My Perfect Franchise for sponsoring the Warpath. Well, Matt, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do before we get into the interviews with Blake and Justin. Not a surprise commitment, a surprise of the timing, definitely not a surprise in terms of Florida State liking the kid, pursuing him on the recruiting trail. Judah Daniels pulling their trigger for Florida State on Tuesday yesterday. What's your kind of read on what this commitment means for Florida State? Obviously, this is a guy that they saw in the spring. They brought him back on during the summer. He was at the elite camp where he got an offer from Terrence Knighton. Traditionally, an offensive lineman. Now, potentially, an under-the-radar, to quote College Football 26, a gem prospect potentially for Florida State. They may have found something good here. What do you think?
Yeah, I saw him at that camp, and he definitely looked good. Knighton offered him pretty quickly at that camp, if I remember correctly. And yeah, I agree with you on the timing being a little weird.
Because this wasn't really on our radar.
It wasn't. And he hadn't taken an official visit yet. Like, I thought he did visit for the East Texas A&M game, and then I thought he would take an official visit later down the road, and then it happens then. And also, like, with Florida State's good start, you thought maybe they're going to circle back on some big-time defensive linemen like Gerville at UF. And, like, that's just a name to throw out there. Nothing thinking. Actually, that's his teammate at Fort Myers. But I feel like, I don't know, give me your opinion on this, but getting this defensive lineman replacement, Tate Carrington, even though I think they were going to bring him in the fold anyway, do you think this kind of closes off their chances with any big name guys? Like, do you think they're not going to go after him? Like, this is it for the defensive line class?
No, I think if you're going to continue your momentum on the recruiting trail, you make roster spots for big guys. There is no future where, like, let's just say like a Trenton Henderson, for example, if you continue to perform on the field, and granted, they're not 1-to-1 in their positions. I think Judah is mainly inside and Trenton is going to be on the outside, right? You make spots for guys like that. And with the, of course, the roster limit being what it is now, you can take guys that you look at their film like Judah and you say, well, hey, there's something good here. Like, I feel like Florida State saw his senior film and they liked what they saw because, again, there's that position change element where he was on the offensive side of the ball. You got to see what he looks like on the defensive side of the ball. Clearly, Florida State saw enough to where when he came for the East Texas A&M game 2 weeks ago, they said, okay, green light. We'll take you.
Yeah.
That is what goes through my mind in terms of the timing and how this happened. Surely they must like what they see on his senior film enough in order for them to take him at this point. But if you're Florida State, you capitalize on the recruiting momentum where you get it. So there's nothing in my mind that says, okay, they're going to choose to take Judah Daniels and not go after somebody like a Trenton Henderson or a Kendall Guerville or who's that kid who committed to Oregon that now is escaping me, that Florida State's definitely not in it for, but just to use as an example, Deuce Gerald. It's Deuce Gerald. So definitely I'd have to go back and look at a senior film. And obviously, if you're watching this, you'll be seeing his film up on the screen now as I put it up in post editing. I'm interested to see what his senior film looks like. And maybe we can come back next week and talk a little bit more about what we see on that film and what he potentially could do for Florida State. But if we want to look at it 1-to-1, Matt, as a replacement for Tank Carrington on the inside of and that interior of the defensive line, if Florida State really likes what they see in his film, bring it in. Bring him in. Accept him with open arms.
And in an era of 105 scholarships, there's no downside to it, right? He's a good kid. Right. He's not going to cause problems. Worst case, it ends up being a bust, and he transfers to a lower level school later on. But you can see if you can develop him, and then if you develop him, you're getting praised for, number one, a good eval, and number two, you can develop your players, and that's a recruiting pitch to other guys.
If you see a prospect like a Judah Daniels that you like his film and you want to take a chance on him, you think you can develop him, by all means, go do it. I'd rather have that than have you take guys like Jamori Flagg and Denos White, who the jury is still out on Jamori Flagg, right?
Where did Denos White go?
He went to like a Division II community college or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know where he ended up.
I can't remember where he landed off the top of my head, but that was not a good take whatsoever. So all of that is to say, interesting new commitment for Florida State. A couple of other guys that were on campus this past weekend, Matt, guys that Florida State did recruit in the past to varying degrees, but were back on campus this weekend for different reasons. Obviously, Yahya God, who we talked about last week on the show, recent UCLA commitment or decommitment rather, that Florida State was involved with earlier on in January, that definitely trailed off after commitments to SMU and obviously, of course, UCLA. Back on campus again this past weekend. There are other programs involved that are going to be competing with Florida State here. What are you hearing on God and the developments there in terms of him potentially coming back on campus for an official visit?
Yeah, so I definitely think he is going to official visit. He told me that after the game on Saturday. The only other one scheduled that I know of right now is Wisconsin. He announced that date on Twitter, but he told us outside of Doak on Saturday that was the only one planned. Auburn is a school to watch here. Washington as well. I think, he also said Colorado. But obviously with Wisconsin being the only one planned to visit, that's the one you look at as your top competition right now. And, they're also looking at a coaching change as well. So it's interesting. I feel like this is one that if Florida State pushes for, they can have. And it's like there's a couple edge rushers in that group right now, right? Like Chris Carbon, Jarius Rogers. I think they just have to be careful of who they want. But it seemed like Florida State did a really good job of communicating with him on this visit, like even with it being a game day visit. You saw the picture of him with Odell, Knighton, and Tony White. He said he got to see and talk with Norvell after the game as well. Like, he got to talk to everybody, which you don't hear a lot about on game day visits, which I found very interesting. He said Florida State's towards the top of the list. I think he'll come back for an official visit, and depending on where we see the dominoes fall, I think Florida State could definitely grab this one.
And then Demarius Yates, obviously teammate of current Florida State's offensive tackle Mario Nash Jr. at Kemper County out in Mississippi, currently an Ole Miss commit. Visited during the spring, said Florida State was a factor in his recruitment. Didn't necessarily feel like it. It felt like they liked other running backs better, especially with Amari Thomas already committed at that time. Florida State still involved here, Matt. To what degree, I think we may have mixed feelings on. I think this had more to do with maybe seeing Mario Nash than anything else.
So I trend towards that as well. Talking to him, Michael kind of ran the interview after the game, but I was there as well, listening and talking to him. He led with the fact of seeing Mario, and it didn't sound like he talked to many coaches either. I don't think he showed up too long before the game started because I saw someone close to him, his recruitment. I saw Mario Nash's dad outside when he was walking into the game, and he said, "Hey, like, have you seen Yates yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't." You remember last year where they dropped him off? They changed the drop-off location due to construction. I was just standing there waiting for them all to walk out into the game instead of waiting out there for hours. But he told me at that point he was on the shuttle on the way to the facility, and that was right before they were about to walk in for the game. So I think he didn't get there when the coaches were talking in that little tailgate area they do in the IPF. And then he was out pretty quickly after the game, and he said the guy he spent the most time with was Mario. So, yeah, I think he said Florida State could still get an official visit, and that the two schools outside of Ole Miss, Tennessee's pushing the hardest for a flip, and then FSU. I do feel like this was more to see Mario than anything, but we'll kind of see if he schedules that official visit and prove me wrong.
It's funny that you talk about the construction because, man, if I were still out there doing that whole song and pony dance or whatever that phrase is out there with the construction, I'm so glad that you don't have to go through that anymore because, like, having to deal with the construction. And if you haven't been down to Doe Campbell Stadium yet this season, you go around to the IPF and the football-only facility in that parking lot.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. It looks fantastic. It's frankly eye candy, a good eye candy.
It is.
If you're a recruit rolling up in the Escalade service or whichever vehicle car they're using,
it's like seeing Sidney Thomas or not Sidney Thomas. It's like seeing Sidney Thomas or Sidney Sweeney or Sidney Thomas on a movie poster. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go see that.
Yeah. Do you think our listening base knows who those two people are?
We're younger, so maybe.
Okay,
we'll find out.
Well, there's about to be a surge in searches on Google after that. Quickly to wrap it up before we get Blake in here and talk to Blake. Jacob Curry, a new offer at linebacker for Florida State. Oklahoma seems to be the team in the lead. That seems to be well established. What are Florida State's chances, do you think, of actually becoming a threat in this recruitment, or is this a little bit too late?
I don't think it's too late at all. I think there's a lot of FSU around him at Nice, and I don't think his dad's an FSU fan or he grew up an FSU fan or anything, but like Florida has been in this recruitment, so you become the closest to home that are in it now. Oklahoma is clearly the leader right now. Wiltfong put a pick in, but when Wiltfong puts nothing has happened yet, right? And that pick has been in there for a couple days now, and I think he's still going to take other visits. I feel like he will show up at FSU at some point. I don't know when, but I think Florida State does have a shot here to kind of make up some ground pretty quickly. It's just the fact that it's close to home, and that's appealing, right? And I know from sources around him, the family seems pretty excited about the offers. So I think they can. I really do. I think there's a shot there, but I just have to wait and see when he shows up on campus.
Yeah, of course, Curry coming off an official visit to Oklahoma, supposedly. So maybe
he did make it there, yeah.
So that may be something to do with the Wiltfong pick in the RPM. But I'm kind of with you. The further away we get from that official visit date, and if there's no movement on that front, there may actually be a chance that Florida State can climb back into this one and gain some ground at a prospect they are arriving a little bit late to the party for. So with that being said, Matt and I are super excited to bring in Gators Online recruiting writer Blake Alderman. A great talk forthcoming on the future of Billy Napier, the future of that recruiting class that they have there in Gainesville. We'll see you on the other side. And welcome back to the Warpath here with Gators Online writer Blake Alderman. Thank you so much for joining the show today. Obviously, a lot to talk about here with the relationship between Florida State football and UF football. How are things going for you right now? It hasn't exactly been the start of the season that y'all have been wanting as compared to a better start for Florida State. It's kind of just an inverse of the last, let's say, 12 calendar months, right?
Well, it's seeing how Florida and Florida State both last season in 2024, neither started out great in that first quarter of the season. Florida last season, they had that first bye week, started to sort of show some signs of life. In the UCF game in 2024 and beyond, there were certainly ups and downs. Florida State last year didn't have that bounce back that Florida eventually had. This year, Florida State never even had their down moments. It's been up and up. In Florida, here we are, that first quarter of the season, they're 1-3. A lot of questions, a lot of noise. The temperature check, it's pretty toasty over on this side.
Yeah, I guess to get into it with recruiting, your bread and butter, what just is the state of UF recruiting? There's no decommits yet, but do you think that's going to come soon? What do you think that is?
I feel like it's hard to really ever predict a win, right? But I feel like Florida's class 13th in the Rivals rankings at last check, made up of 19 commits. I don't know that it's really littered with the huge amount of the top 100 type players. They certainly have some really good players, and there's a good, upper crust of that class that a lot of schools are going to be interested in, and if they're not already. And I feel like where there haven't been any decommits, I feel like the temperature check on that class is certainly going up too. I feel like each game there's a new problem, there's a new concern. I feel like if you're not a guy in Florida's class right now that is, if you're not doing it behind closed doors, taking visits, however you want to do that, if you're not planning some backup plans, I feel like you're not really doing yourself you're sort of doing yourself a disservice, right? Like, I mean, you're in the mode of, if you kind of cling too long, you could lose other options. Schools fill up. There's who's going to be the guy that if Florida replaces Billy Napier that Florida would hire? Do you mesh with them? There's so many questions that I feel like sort of the lead up there. Maybe it doesn't lead to a bunch of decommits, but I feel like it's sort of blood in the water. The Sharks are circling, and I feel like you're sort of waiting for that first pin to drop, and if and when it'll happen. I think if Florida continues, obviously on the same track they're on, there's going to be those decommitments. There could be an eventual change of head coach, and then you sort of pretty much pull the plug on your entire roster or most of your roster, and if not, your entire high school class. So I feel like you're sort of bracing yourself. If you're, I guess, UF higher ups, you're sort of bracing yourself for, what could be coming, and you're starting to, hopefully put that plan together on your end of what you're going to do.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned the doing yourself a disservice if you're not starting to take a look at other options and see what else is out there in case of a code black scenario. That's something that we saw with Florida State's season last year. And obviously what happened last year in terms of Florida State's recruiting class isn't exactly going to be apples to what happens this year with Florida's recruiting class. But once the decommit started for FSU last year, the dam kind of broke open. What's the concern level that there's going to be something similar to that before a final decision about Napier's future is made? And is there maybe a sense within the building of kind of walking on eggshells, kind of almost like bracing for something like that if the team's performance continues to be this bad?
Well, I think that compared to last year, where there was still some belief, maybe, that there a couple of this pieces fixed together. I think last year, DJ Lagway's newness of being in that program and what he brought that Graham Mertz did not bring. You had someone that brought a little bit of an X factor, just having that strong arm. That wasn't Graham Mertz's forte. You have the ability to run and escape. Graham Mertz would do it, but it was, again, not his forte. So I feel like last year there was a belief that you had something that could work out. And in Florida's case, with how DJ played and performed and the team rallied around him last year, that played off for them. I feel like this year you sort of have that same guy that was, I don't know, your superhero, if you will, of that 2024 season or the turnaround, the reason for that turnaround. You're not really getting that this season. He's struggling. He's not playing well. Florida's offense in general isn't playing well. So I don't know that there's really that same belief inside the building. I think that for the most part, you have to make the work. And I think you sort of keep plugging along as you go and you keep coaching and doing whatever you need to do until you're told not to, I guess. So I feel like that's sort of at least my vibe in the building right now. But as far as Florida's class, I don't, like I said, I don't really know when the pin would drop. I feel like you're starting to see some of these guys that maybe were hearing from other schools, but we're not planning to take any visits. Maybe they're not planning or already have taken visits, but they're starting to kind of back off that claim of, like rock solid, shut down, no visits anywhere else. Like now they may not be saying, hey, I'm going to visit X, Y, and Z, but I'm not visiting anywhere as of right now, or, I could do something different than what I was doing before. I feel like that's kind of where things are at right now. And again, if the plug is pulled, I think you should pretty much just count this class as a wash. That's just from covering coaching changes. That first transition class is usually that. It's usually made up of guys that you can hang on to. Anyone that maybe gives you a second look, depending on who the hire is, and kind of like whatever's left over there. And half the time, you may not really even see those leftover pieces until that February signing day. So there's sort of some stages when you get to that point. Again, I think that with Florida's commits, it's sort of like they're bracing. You have 4-star wide receiver Marquez Daniel out of Alabama. He just visited Miami this past weekend. Miami wasn't even mentioned whatsoever. They sort of circled back on him. They had already offered looking into him. And, there's plenty of other guys that, KJ Ford, the 4-star edge out of Texas. He was at one point planning to visit Oklahoma, and that was before Florida's losses really started to sort of mount. And he didn't end up making that visit, but now he's kind of circled back with Texas A&M, and he's talking to them. So you see these guys that are starting to put the wheels in motion of taking these types of visits, or they're talking about visits behind closed doors. And, everyone is different with how they treat their recruitment, how they are, publicize what they're doing and what their moves are. But you can sort of tell that there's reservations, and it's going to be, if you have a coaching change, you're going to expect a complete overhaul of the class, whether the commits make that decision or not, or you're at least seeing these guys are going to start taking visits. And whenever this coaching change happens, if it does, then you sort of see what can you do to get this guy back, or is it too far gone? So I feel like it's a really long-winded answer I gave, but there's just so many different scenarios to think about with something like this.
No, it's complicated. And I'm actually really interested to get your perspective on this, because you talked a little bit earlier about that resurgence towards the end of the year. The football team, or the product on the field, looked a lot better, and you were able to flip guys like Dallas Wilson. Napier has landed some pretty damn good recruits in his time at Florida, even among circumstances where the fan base may not be 100% sold with the product on the field. What do you attribute that to? Is it Napier and the way that he pitches himself in the program to the kids? Is it the program itself? Is it the coaching staff around Napier? Is it the prospect of playing in the SEC? What has led to landing some of those guys like a Vernell Brown, like a Dallas Wilson, that, you guys, they're already on the field now?
Sure. I think first and foremost, I think a lot of those guys that you saw Florida flip last cycle, they ended a lot better, like with the 8-5 record and all that, compared to what it was looking the season. But NIL was a play there. There's just so many of those guys. Like Dallas Wilson was a rumored big NIL deal with Oregon. A little bit of a different, scenario, because he did have a sick relative back home that he wanted to be closer to. But NIL is somewhere intertwined with all these reasons and whatever. Ty Jackson was another guy who was going to USC. They were rumored to be throwing around a lot of money in NIL, and that was, you flip that guy. Granted, they were playing poorly on defense last year. So again, that's one of those things where NIL is intertwined in something else. And look, even Hilton Stubbs, like, flipped from Miami last year. Miami is one of those teams that is known for being one of those big spenders on the recruiting trail with NIL. So I think NIL was a factor in maybe the 2024 cycle. But I also think that Billy Napier, even before he was at Florida, he has those SEC ties and experience in the past. Like, if you're coaching in Alabama, you're recruiting guys like Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, like those types of guys, like learning under Saban and in this league, like you just learn what it takes to recruit. Granted, the changes with NIL and everything that's going on in the world is a lot different than when Billy was at Alabama, but you just still you know that you have to really, it's recruit or die in the SEC, and really in a lot of states, like in the state of Florida. So I think that Billy in general, he's a lot different than what we saw with Dan Mullen, who was before Billy there, where he sort of let his staff kind of handle everything. He was there, he was recruiting. It's not like he completely ignored it, but he wasn't as day-to-day with it. Billy is involved with a lot of guys. It used to be under Mullen, if the head coach was recruiting a kid, it's like, man, Florida really likes this guy. Now it's like, it's weird if Billy's not in touch with a kid. Like, that's the norm. You're involved in all this. You have your fingerprints on this class. They have to know you. So I think that that's another reason therefore too. And there's things like the Gator Made program, which is sort of kind of helping these guys off the field with their brands, professional. I think that's something that a lot of parents like. Florida has the academics there. So I feel like Florida does cater to a lot of things to where you can play in the SEC. I think Napier is a good recruiter, and NIL is there. Those things sort of check off some of the football boxes there. And then with parents, you've got the academics that Florida can offer. That's something that's usually going to sell mom. Mom loves academics. And then you've got the Gatorade, which kind of helps you with your financials with NIL, how to balance that, how to pay attention to this and that, how to build your brand. So that's something that sort of goes hand in hand with a lot of like what parents and what kids want there. So I think Florida does check off a lot of boxes. And I think it was Josh Pate that was on what his show week 2 so long ago. It was like he explained Napier at Florida sort of like if you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you've got like the kitchen and the pantry that you see on like the Food Channel, right? Or the Food Network, where you've got all the ingredients there when you're making Thanksgiving dinner, but you can't cook and the food's still terrible. I feel like that's kind of where Florida's at, to where I feel like the program itself does offer a lot of positives. But as far as wins and losses, what is what keeps you going year to year as a coach, if you can't win those games and you can't win on game day, then you're just kind of cooking crappy food. And I feel like that's kind of where things are at right now. So I guess I think Florida itself does promote a lot of things, but I also do think that Napier is a good recruiter, and I think he's been one since he's arrived here at Florida.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even just looking at your commit list now, it's Florida State had their fingerprints all over this thing. There was a lot of FSU UF battles going into the summer that UF ended up winning out in. I mean, Carson Baker, Hezzy Kent, Gurville, FSU was in it, but I wouldn't say it was a FSU Florida battle. I see you do stories all the time of who's the biggest competition for X recruit. Who do you think on this commit list is where Florida State is the biggest competition for UF right now?
Well, I'd say number one for me is probably Carson Baker, the 4-star running back there out of Georgia. And I say that because that one came down to literally Florida and Florida State. Ohio State had some buzz. Things fizzled out there. South Carolina is involved still and was involved. They never got an official visit, but he's visited both Florida and Florida State. I believe as far as going into the spring and the summer, I think that those two hosted him more than anybody else. So I think that that's probably the number one guy for me. Gurville, like you said, I don't know that was really one that Florida State was really, really thick in there. But I do also think that Florida State was kind of a late bloomer in that recruitment, to where it was like you heard absolutely nothing about Florida State. And then boom, I'm showing up, I think in the spring. I think he showed up there. I just felt like Florida State maybe got in there a little too late. He did tear his ACL and his meniscus in week 1 for his high school senior season. So you're sort of inheriting a guy, if you did flip him, a guy that does have that knee injury. And it's a serious knee injury in the grand scheme of injuries there, but it's not what it used to be, X amount of years ago, where like, medicine and science, like a guy that blows his knee up like that is not something where it's like, we got to figure out how to get rid of that one. So I think that's a premier position. That wouldn't surprise me if that's one that if Florida State's not already kind of checking the temperature there. I think that's worth a look, just considering he's a defensive lineman. And you mentioned Hezzy Kent. I think that one had twists and turns along the way. I felt like it was like this guy's always was going to Florida, but it was Florida against Miami. And then it was maybe it's Florida against Texas. And then there at the end, I felt like it sort of transitioned to more of like a Florida State battle. But it was kind of one where it's like, I don't really know who Florida's going against here. So, I think that, again, that's a guy that is built like an offensive tackle. He's an offensive lineman who's wants to play. He's adamant on playing tight end. But when you look at how guys that have that size can help in the blocking scheme, you can use them in different ways. I mean, it's not like the guy has bricks for hands. He has good hands. I think he had a good junior season there being a pass catcher. Granted, he's added some more size to his frame since then. But I just feel like a guy that has that size that can help in blocking and passing, like that's gonna get you calls, whether you run that 12-man personnel or you just run a heavy run scheme. That's why I think Miami, just seeing how they really like to have that physical run, I feel like that makes a lot of sense why they're still calling him. So those are some of the main ones. I think Caden Hall, the 4-star safety, is one where Florida State has sort of tried to kind of like, send that like late you up type text thing to him. And I feel like he's at that point. He's one of those guys where I'm like, you look at his recruitment and you kind of already think like, who's probably gone, who's probably staying. And I think that's one to where if he didn't somehow, some way stick, because it is really hard to predict how someone's brain's going to work when something hasn't happened yet. But I feel like that's one to where Florida, if a new staff is there, they could sort of spin the block back. He likes Florida enough there, but Florida State was the school that he likes. I mean, he's up from in the Panhandle area there. So I feel like Florida State is sort of kind of their recent resurgence with him, I think, is getting them a look. I think one of the interesting things in the next week or so is that he has been expected to visit Florida for the Texas game, and now that's not as certain as it once was, and he could show up at Florida State Miami. So I think that's one where you sort of get an idea. Granted, if I'm going to watch a game, I know which one I think would be more exciting. We could be like going off of how they both played, but I feel like that sort of gives you an insight into where he's at in his head. Just going to show that because Florida State has recently got in touch with him. And then just one more guy that I'm looking at there. I think that CJ Bronaugh is probably one. I don't know really so much about where he's at because he is pretty upfront about I'm solid. I'm focused on Florida. Florida State was involved with him. I believe they're still in touch with him, and I don't really know how open he is, or at least it's hard to tell because he's pretty guarded and pretty good at kind of having a blank face of where he's at with things. So I think that that's a guy that Florida State has been in touch with, and I think that that's one that, just to kind of give an outline of guys, I think he's one that's worth watching. You
were at that Under Armour camp that CJ Bronaugh was at, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He was committed to Nebraska and still wouldn't really say anything off of Nebraska. Then he was visiting places. Good kid, but he does know how to keep that poker face for sure.
Yeah, it's really hard to get a read on. There's a large group of people on the Gators Online message board that if I talk about recruiting, write about recruiting, like, we don't care, man. But there are some that's like, hey, Blake, do you think this guy could stick, whether they are talking right now or just eventually? That's one to where I feel like you don't really know. But and I say that because I think being in state is a factor, being close to home is a factor. I think the academics are a thing. There's parts of Florida where I feel like he may wait and see what the coach does if there is a change. I feel like that's one where Florida has done enough as a program to sort of sell him on a lot of parts of the thing. But again, I've seen this before where there's guys that are like, man, I'm in past coaching changes. We're like, man, I'm going to Florida no matter what. I'm going to change the program no matter who the coach is. And once it happens, it's like they completely 180 and it's something different. So it is really hard to get a feel before, something happens, if it even does.
If you're Scott Strickland, do you wait till the end of the season or do you wait until because the reason I asked is there's been a bunch of rumored reasons as to why or why not Florida or Billy Napier still head coach of Florida, red shirts being one of them. If you're Scott Strickland and the performance on the field hasn't improved by let's say week 8, I don't know where week 8 is on the schedule for y'all, but do you go ahead and pull the trigger then? Try and get some messaging out to recruits saying, okay, we're going to fix this. We're gonna right the ship. Maybe whoever the interim guy is, there's some manageable improvement there. Or do you wait until the end of the season, have it be a little bit more clean cut? What do you do if you were Scott Strickland?
I mean, if it's still continuing to be on the path that it's on now, or at least close to that path, I think if we're looking at week 8, then I think I'm pulling the plug on week 8. If you're showing no signs of it, because I was talking to a buddy about this. I feel like if you're looking at it from an AD and you're looking at it from a money perspective as a program, your fan base and your boosters, you're risking off making them mad at you. That's money into your program and all this, that, and the other, which now you have rev share that's paying for your recruits and your players, all those types of things. You really don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So I think that's one thing. You're already risking the fact that the blood is in the water, that schools are already poaching your kids. And if you're continuing on a track where it just seems like most of these kids open up their phone, they read Twitter and they see this news and that news, they see that your coach isn't good, they believe that their coach isn't good, and they start looking around and they're looking at other factors. And clearly kids can make up their own decisions and their own thoughts in there, but it's sort of it plants the seed of that, to question things, I guess. You're already risking you talked about the red shirt rule, with the 4 games. I feel like you're well past that. And if that's a factor, then, you're already past that threshold. And I think that it obviously gives you some time, which if I'm Scott Strickland and things we're looking at right now, you're already sort of putting out those feelers. If it's me and it's my decision there, you're already kind of getting an idea of, hey, would you be interested? Hey, talking to whatever. So I feel like the earlier and I guess the more time you give yourself to where you can kind of have an idea before that early signing period or before the transfer portal window is open, I feel like you want to start getting your ducks in a row so that whenever you can make that hire, you can make it as swiftly as possible so that you can try to manage to save what's in the class. You can start building your class, your portal haul that you want, and trying to hold on to whoever you want. So I don't really know because I feel like everything changes with the calendars and the dates of portal this and signing dates for that. So I feel like it's kind of hard to really get a true grasp of when is the right time to make a change. But for me right now, I feel like the closer you get to that early signing period, the less chance you give yourself for the new guy. If you're making a change, to try to hold on to the players he's got now, start trying to get an idea of their staff and trying to figure out some way or form to hold on to whatever you can or build whatever you can for the recruiting class. So I feel like earlier is better to me, but there are people that, on the board and Florida fan base where they're ready to pull the plug after week 3 or 4. That's a little early for me. And I see that Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, UCLA, all those schools are making those fires now. But I feel like like that's just so early to me. Like I don't know, maybe they just felt like whatever's on the roster now is not good. Like the rosters and teams haven't been good, so it doesn't matter. We'll just go ahead and do it. And I do feel like Florida has a lot of good players on their roster, and I feel like it's hard because once you make a change, it's pretty much you blow up your roster and you see what happens. Like look at Mississippi State last year; they were not good, and they had like a hard. I don't remember how many guys left, but like almost all of them I feel like left. So I feel like you want to try to avoid that because that makes it tougher on the new guy, and fan bases are less impatient than they've ever been. Boosters are less impatient than they've ever been. And like ADs are even less impatient than ever. So I feel like if you can get it done, not too early, but early enough, I feel like it just kind of gives you more time to figure out your next move and then attack that.
And that's an interesting point because Florida, I think the thing that Florida does have in comparison to UCLA and Virginia Tech, it's a desirable position. It's
right.
a SEC job. Florida has more to lose if they decide to completely wipe the slate clean and have to start over. So that hesitancy. I was actually really proud because I did look at the schedule. I'm like, oh, week 8's not so bad. You get Mississippi State, then you get into a bye week, and then you have Georgia right after. So I don't know necessarily.
There's a bye in between there too, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. There's a bye in between Mississippi
yeah.
State. So let's say that's week 8. You fire them after Mississippi State. You get that bye week, and the reward for the interim head coach is, hey, you have to face Georgia immediately. So
Lucky
I don't know. Right. That's SEC football, right? Blake, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time. And we hope to have you back on at another point.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Once again, a big thank you to Blake with Gators Online for taking the time to talk to Matt and I today. He's got a nice stash going, doesn't he? He's got a good stash.
He does. He always has. Even when he was at a competitor company, he always has.
Which is a great way to introduce another sponsor of the Warpath in Dollar Shave Club. Look, I know that having the bearded guy Reed is maybe not the ideal case scenario, but this is not a one-man show here on the Warpath. This is a two-man show. Matt Lasser looking very dapper, very clean-shaven as he does. When you rep your team, you don't stop at that jersey. Dollar Shaves Club's Collegiate Razor handles combined grooming with glory, letting students, grads, and fans like Matt and myself show their school spirit and style from the sink to the stadium. Shave with school pride. Visit dollarshaveclub.com to grab your college handle today. And, of course, go Seminoles. Thanks once again to Dollar Shave Club for sponsoring the Warpath. We're going to get Texas insider Justin Wells with Inside Texas in here momentarily. Talk about a couple of recruiting battles that Texas and Florida State, they may or may not be about to dive straight into it. We'll hear from Justin Wells with Inside Texas just after this.
All right, we are here now with Justin Wells of Inside Texas. This was all part of my master plan to get more Texans on the show. Nick wasn't all really in on it. He wanted to block Justin out, but we're taking it on here,
only
Justin.
Only Florida people allowed. It's a Florida eccentric show. No, thank you for coming on, Justin. Excited to scratch your brain a little bit at your expertise of Texas football. Obviously, it's vast, and let's start with kind of a big one that's been in the news recently regarding a certain 2027 quarterback in Kavion Bryant. Kavion Bryant coming on a visit to Florida State. Florida State really pushing the football basketball angle as they've done with a couple of recruits that have come through Tallahassee of recent. Florida State was in a good position coming out of that visit. A quick trip to Texas Tech may have changed things. I know he was planning on being in Austin to see Texas at some point, if not last weekend. What are the kind of latest things that you're hearing about Kavion Bryant and where that recruitment is going prior to a commitment in October?
Yeah, so Kavion's from my neck of the woods here in East Texas. He goes to Westwood High School, and it's in Palestine. There's actually multiple high schools in Palestine. Westwood was always kind of the stepping child. They're always the stepchild. They didn't have any success in multiple sports for years. Then the Bryant family moved in. There's Kavion. There's Caden, class of 2029. He's a basketball ranked. There's Kobe, class of 31, who's also ranked in basketball. If you didn't know, Kavion Bryant is also ranked in basketball. Hey, listen. Florida State was first. They were the first people to step up to Kavion and his family and say, we want you to play football and basketball. Because going into this, when his recruitment started about a year and a half ago, that was the sales point. If you don't know, he's the Rivals' #1 quarterback. He's also a 4-star basketball player. I've seen him do both. This kid dropped 72 on the local school a couple years ago. Like, that's hard to do in a gym by yourself. his athleticism is off the charts. I remember covering Vince Young. He was never a quarterback in the rankings. He was an athlete. And I've even made the distinction that I think Kavian's the number one athlete in the country. He's also an incredible quarterback. Don't get it twisted, but he's that good. Florida State was first. They were selling Charlie Ward. They were selling that type of vision. And there's a path to the field for Kavian that he really enjoyed. He really likes Mike Norvell. The family really liked Tallahassee. So then fast forward, he really wants that Texas football offer. You know, Steve Sarkisian does not offer quarterbacks very often in any class. He usually offers probably 3 or 4 per class. Arches was 1. Diabelle's was 1. You know, he's very particular. Kavian came down by himself for a private workout because he missed the elite camp, looked tremendous, walked away with that offer. It was on his dad's birthday. They celebrated that night. I start thinking, man, this kid might be trending Texas. There's a lot of things that are kind of pointing in Texas' way. And then the oil money came up. So Texas Tech jumped in the mix. Look, Texas Tech has been in this recruitment for a while. You know, what you're seeing and what they're doing with the class of 2026, but really in the class of 2027 is extended to Kavian Bryant. They've got Cooper Hackett as an offensive tackle 5-star. They got LaDamian Guyton as a number 1 edge. They need that number 1 quarterback, and they are willing to pay top dollar. They're willing to go over market to get this kid, which they're going over market for most of these kids that you can tell. And so after that Texas Tech visit, I thought, man, this does not point well for Texas. He was still going to take that unofficial, and he did. He came in this weekend. He really had a good time. His mom got to hang out with L'Oreal. She got to hang out with some of the ladies of Texas. Kavian got to kind of see what the game day experience and everything is, just like he did at Florida State, just like he did at Texas Tech. But there's 2 things that are hurting Texas. One is Diabelle. They quarterbacks don't like following other big name quarterbacks. Just kind of the way it works. It happens at times, but often it's a deterrent and they're going to go somewhere else. I don't think they're big fans of Diabelle because that's impeding that path to the field. That's important to him. Kavian Bryant does not want to go somewhere he has to sit for 2 or 3 years. Even though he does require some development, his athleticism, I think, can play year 1. So now I think this thing is going to Texas Tech. I talked to a couple other people earlier today and last night. This thing looks like it's going to be Texas Tech. He's going to make a decision in October. I think Halloween is probably going to be the date. That's not determined yet, but that's kind of what they've been telling me. I'm going to say this. I put in an RPM on Wednesday for Texas Tech. If it wasn't Tech, it was going to be Florida State. I don't think Texas is in this anymore. I think they have a shot. They're always going to have a shot. But, guys, he sees a path to the field quicker at Florida State and Texas Tech. Right now, I give Texas Tech the edge. Remember, we're in the middle of 2027. We're in the middle of his junior season. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. Also, another caveat, the basketball angle is not there anymore. The fact – and I think him and his father figured out if you're going to play quarterback at a big-time Division I school, you really need to focus on being a quarterback, probably 12 months out of the year. Playing basketball would hurt that. Remember Ronald Curry at North Carolina. I remember a couple other guys that tried 2 ways, and it's really hard. But at quarterback, it's just difficult. So right now, I think Kavian Bryant winds up at Texas Tech, but I think Florida State is a close second, and I don't see the Seminoles backing off at all.
Yeah, and I think we always knew that Texas Tech would probably have the edge in this recruitment just due to the money. And hey, I wanted to ask you, being a Texas guy and me knowing just how Texas schools are, how annoying is it that Texas Tech keeps getting in all this? Like, they're not as good of a school as Texas. Lubbock is not a great town, and it's just buying all of it. And I know you agree with me on all of that. I don't think most people disagree with that. I just wanted to say, how annoying is it to your subscribers that Texas Tech keeps coming in and buying all these kids?
Yeah, I don't want to agree with any of that, but it's probably true.
Yeah.
Look, Texas Tech's been a nuisance, and let me tell you something. They're not going anywhere. Cody Campbell's money spends, and it spends well. They have got a good infrastructure there. They've got great facilities. They're trying to make Lubbock a presentable town because it's just Texas Tech's had success in baseball, yep, in college basketball, men's and women's, in track and field. Texas Tech's been a competitive school in everything except football. I think their last sole conference championship was in the 40s or 50s, something like that. And so they're trying to make that group relevant. And I think Joey McGuire's the guy to do it. He's put a tremendous staff around him. I love his offensive line coach, Josh Cochran. He's from Hallsville, Texas. He actually played left tackle at the University of Texas. He is a great guy. They've got some really good coaches on that staff. And so I'll say this. I cover it, and it's fun for us, and I like the chaos. But for our fans, our members, they don't like it. Every time I post something about a player and I'm like, hey, Texas Tech's in here, we're here, they instantly de facto go to, hey, that's too much money. And so it can be a nuisance, but guess what? This is college football in 2025, so you better buckle up.
So, I mean, the elephant in the room, you kind of mentioned it there. It's the money. The money's going to be there. Now that basketball isn't 100% a factor in Kavion's recruitment, and that was certainly an angle that Florida State was taking, I think more so than other programs. Not to say that Texas Tech doesn't have a basketball program worthy of being in that conversation. Is it going to be that NIL number that's going to have to tick up if you're Florida State as they go through the rest of this recruitment, to where, sure, they'll be in it, they'll be coveting him heavily, but is it the NIL package that's going to have to improve, among other things? Obviously, play on the field being one of them. Florida State's having a better season than they had last year right now, so continued success being what it is. Is it NIL and on-field performance that you think would allow Florida State to really hang in there and really apply pressure if he does indeed pull the trigger for Texas Tech like you're expecting in October?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I've actually gone back and forth on this RPM for 2 weeks now. And I was looking for a differentiator because I'm telling you, when you talk to Kavion, I've seen Kavion play play a couple different sports multiple times. He talks about Tech and Florida State in the same regard. He has an affection for both those places. I think Tech is the home school, the one that he can be a little bit closer to home, even though Lubbock is probably like 9 hours from Palestine. But I think Florida State is the forge your own path school. Every recruitment has those two. They have the homeschool in-state pool, and then they have the I want to spread my wings and go do my own thing. Well, that's Florida State. They're going to stay in this, and they have to. They're way too ingrained. Like, he loves the Seminoles right now. And the basketball angle, I think, was good because it was transparent. They were like, look, we understand you want to do more things. But they've kind of narrowed that down. What Florida State's going to have to do is that NIL offer, I don't think it has to top Tech, but I think it has to be comparable. And again, I think it's path to the field. Like, I don't know where Castellanos is right now as in his if he's a junior, senior, whatnot.
Well, so technically he's a senior, but he did play 4 games under Malzahn at UCF that first year before that extra game was allowed in the postseason. So there's kind of a little bit of a weird situation with that.
Well, who's the 2026 take for Florida State at quarterback?
It's Jaden O'Neal out of Mustang, Oklahoma.
And then they just got Kevin Sperry from Denton Geyer.
Okay, Sperry, actually, I know
Sperry's good.
Sperry is
good, and they love Sperry.
Rock Hill.
Right.
And then Sperry, listen, Sperry's been throwing the ball like that since 8th grade in the DFW area. Yeah. He was at Oklahoma, and I completely forgot he transferred to Malzahn in Florida State. Like, I completely forgot that. I don't think that hurts you guys. I've watched Jaden O'Neal. I think he's a solid prospect. Sperry can throw it. Okay, like, he can spin that ball. I think Florida State has to come close to the NIL. I think they have to continue to win. And I think that's going to have a factor too. A lot of times wins and losses early on don't really do anything for recruits. That's more for fans' emotions. But over the course of the season, you build that. If Florida State keeps looking as good as they have so far this year, they're going to be in it just like Tech, who they look really good this year. I think that's going to be the battle. Again, I think he probably picks Tech in the next month and a half. But I think Florida State is right there on the heels just by talking to him. He has such an affection for the Seminoles, for Mike Norvell, for Coach Malzahn, for those guys. And again, they were first. They were really the first school to come in there and go, we not only want you in football, we want you in basketball. And they meant it. It wasn't just a sales pitch. It was a performance. And so I think the transparency there is what gives Florida State, keeps them in the battle, to be honest.
Now to talk about Derek Cooper. Derek Cooper is a recruit that Florida State fans will know well. Obviously, they've been recruiting him for multiple years. Huge prospect coming out of Chaminade-Madonna. Texas and Steve Sarkisian weren't in it initially. They weren't really kind of around that recruitment. Some things change on the coaching staff there at Texas. New guy comes in with relations to Derek Cooper. They're able to nab him without even so much as an official visit. How did that get done, Justin?
Yeah, so I like to tell fans every recruitment is different. It really is. Every single one has its own story. There are some similarities, but they really do have their own recruitments. So when Tashard Choice, the former running back coach of Texas, took the job of the Detroit Lions, Texas had to bring in a new guy. They brought in West Virginia running back coach Chad Scott. Well, he's a Florida guy, and so he's got some connections down there. Well, over the course of the first 3 or 4 months on the job, he didn't connect enough with the local guys that are really highly rated. Javian Osborne out of Forney, going to Notre Dame. KJ Edwards out of Carthage, headed to Texas A&M. Tredarian Ball, one of my favorite recruits in all of 2026, headed to Oregon. He did that a year ago. And so Chad Scott was kind of sitting there held, he was with his hands empty. And he remembered he had ties to that South Florida branch, to some of that area. And then it was just a matter of time. Put some Derek Cooper film on. Oh my gosh, this guy's really good. Let's get into this recruitment. Derek Cooper took an unofficial to Texas in April that was similar to an OV in that all the family came, they stayed multiple days, and they got a really good sense of where Texas was and where they needed him. Then he comes up with a commitment date. I believe it was like early July. He was going to make a commitment. And this is after the Georgia commitment, decommitment thing.
Whatever that was. Yeah.
That's a blimp in the road, to be totally honest with you, in this recruitment. He had that official visit date. And I'll never forget, I reached out to Derek and I said, hey, you're getting ready for this commitment? Everything's ready. And he goes, well, I'm going to postpone it. And I was taken aback. I said, really? He goes, I still have to see Texas. And I thought, oh, okay, this one might turn in another direction. Texas brought it with NIL. Let's not beat around the bush. They went heavy, and they had to. Miami was looking like the school at the time. They really were. He built great relationships with Georgia and Florida State, but Miami, it just seemed like was the de facto school that was going to wind up getting him. They had put in probably the longest amount of time and effort. And Texas came in and destroyed their NIL offer, like made it non-existent. And so fast forward a few more, he commits, I believe, on July 20th. He takes his official visit this last weekend. If anybody saw the stuff on social media or at InsideTexas.com, it was a giant family affair. His mother was having a blast. Derek was having a blast. I was able to catch up with him just a little bit after he left. I think Texas solidified themselves in this recruitment, but I don't think it's over, because I think Florida State has a path there. I think he's really close to the running back coach at Florida State. And I think that relationship, you can still tug on the stay home heart. You can still tug on that string. It's there. He's close. If I see Derek Cooper show up to an FSU game in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I will be zero surprised. These kids like to take visits. But like out-of-state commitments that you had to used to watch take these in-state trips, NIL has changed that. If the NIL isn't at least matchable or comparable, a lot of times I think it's just for fun. And sometimes you're kind of spinning your wheels. I honestly think, and I reported this Monday, I think I told Matt about it, I think Florida State's the school to watch here. I think Miami is I don't think they've submitted, but I think they understand it's a tall mountain to climb. FSU doesn't seem to be bothered by that. They're still putting on the full court press. And so Texas feels good about keeping him. He's the only running back in this class, and he wants to be that. And Texas has assured him of that, and he is going to be that. They're going to take 2 in 2027. But right now, I like Cooper to stay to Texas. But if there's one school that I wouldn't be surprised to see him pop in, it's Florida State. I think he built a really good relationship there. I think there's some common players. There's some players at FSU that he knows, that he's friends with. You hit that connection, you hit that home strings, sometimes that helps out. And so right now, I like Texas with Cooper to stay, but FSU is the school we're watching now, not Miami.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising to me because, I just was never as high on Florida State's chances considering, how they left things after the 2-10 season. And obviously you're going to have to continue to prove it with your performance on the field. And that goes for a lot of recruitments that Florida State is going to be trying to claw back into. So, that was going to be the question that I asked you next, but I already kind of got to it. It's just, how real is this for Florida State? And it seems like it is real, that interest. And he is expected to be in for the Miami game next week, I still believe, Matt. Isn't that not Florida State Miami?
Not set in stone, but we know it's one he wants to get to, and one that people around the recruitment have said that they're looking at it and setting it up for now. But yeah, it's Yak has done, our running backs coach named David Johnson, Coach Yak. He's always been on this one, and he's been good. That's just kind of what Yak does. And we've debated this recruitment a lot over the last few weeks. Is Florida State really in it? Steve Wiltfong keeps saying there's something to watch, but come on now, Texas. And it's like, it's been a big debate, but I do agree that, Florida State has a shot here if they can make maybe a hometown discount with that relationship, but that's probably the really only chance.
I could see that. And I understand and respect that. I mean, I'll tell you this, Derek and Diabell have gotten closer. And that's the Miami. That's the
they're right down the street from each other.
Fort Lauderdale American Heritage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time I put in why this, I'm glad I've got you guys on. So in Derek Cooper's profile, it says, what is it? Fort Lauderdale, Chaminade, Madonna.
Yep, so he's a South Florida expert.
So that's that on our board. We have someone that lives in this town called Hollywood, Florida.
It's Hollywood.
They are adamant that it's Hollywood. And I said, listen, I'm just going off of what the On3 Rivals thing tells me. I don't know the differences. I don't know the districts or the little counties in that area. I'm not aware of that. I can't put anything but Hollywood, Florida on there now, or I get an email. So I was curious how that kind of worked out. Him and Diabell have gotten a lot closer. Dia has taken, you don't see him doing it on social media, but behind the scenes, Diabell is running these recruitments. Like, he is contacting all these guys. He helped with James Johnson. He helped with Derek Cooper, and he's helping with some other guys that they could potentially flip here in the next couple months. And so I think FSU's in it. Right now, I think Cooper sticks with Texas, but I know this is recruiting. And I know if you go definitive, you're going to look like a fool at some point. And so I'm always keeping options open. And I think the tab of Florida State is still in the open box.
Man, you said it. I mean, we have a daily butt cover on this show every week. It's like, you can't, especially in this business now, you can't be 100% on anything like you used to be able to. There are some things that you can. For your board member, Hollywood and Plantation are about 22 minutes from each other. Plantation, where Diabell plays, is west of Fort Lauderdale. So it is technically Fort Lauderdale. Hollywood is south of Dania Beach, closer to Miami. Okay. So that is roughly how that. So geographically, 20 minutes, you're going to hop on I-95 for 5 to 10 minutes and you're going to be there. So it's not close. Like they're worlds apart. So
hey, I love getting geography lessons from my members at Inside Texas. That's why we have the best community. That's why On3 and Rivals have the best recruiting sites, because we get lessons every day in geography. We didn't even know it.
There you go.
Hey, man, if you ever go to Hollywood to go see Derek Cooper, that's where the Guitar Casino Hotel is. So you'll have yourself a good time.
I'm a big music guy. I don't know if you can tell by my album, my vinyl collection. I'm a big music guy, and don't say that too loud, because our publisher and owner, Eric Nalin, might try to send me to South Florida to go see these guys. And so I don't know. I don't know if I'm made for South Beach just yet.
Yeah. It's similar to Orlando in the sense that you're going to find a lot of good programs like within 20, 25 minutes of each other, just like in that nucleus. You got your Miami New Orleans, you got your Plantation American Heritage, Miami Central, like they're all there, kind of like that Davie area. Yeah. Yeah, except Lubbock is 9 hours away and Dallas Fort Worth is gigantic.
Lubbock is a flight, man. I've driven there once, never again.
Just to move on here for the sake of driving us home here, did want to ask you about Arch Manning, because we talked about quarterbacks. A lot of this segment has been talking about the quarterbacks. Greats following greats. Quarterbacks don't tend to do that. Obviously, Diabell is going in, he's committed this year. Arch Manning, former 5-star prospect, not got off to the best start at Texas in his third season. What do you kind of make of that as somebody that obviously is incredibly knowledgeable about not only where he came from, but what everybody thought he would be? Can he still be that? What is your take on what's happened with Arch the first couple weeks of the season?
Oh, Archibald. Yeah. So I made 9 trips during his recruitment from Tyler, Texas to New Orleans, commuted 8 hours there, 8 hours back. And it was all worth it, because his recruitment is something I will take for the rest of my life. I've never been involved in a recruitment like that ever. You talk about bubble tape, a prospect, bubble wrap, like it was unreal.
Yeah.
But you know what? I got to know him, and he's just like any other college kid. He likes to have fun. He's very carefree. But what we didn't factor in is the expectation level. Like, it got between his ears, guys. And I want to say he's past that now, but I don't think Sam Houston State's a good enough sample for us to make that distinction. He's going to have to do that against Florida in 2 weeks in the swamp. I don't care who's playing quarterback down there. That defense flies around. And he's going to have to do that against Oklahoma the next week in Dallas, and their defense is playing tremendous ball. The thing with Arch is I think it got between his ears. Like we never factor in the expectations. Like we say it, and we're like, man, he's gonna have to follow his uncles and his dad and his grandfather and all this stuff. Oh, he'll be fine. He's human. That's what we learned. This kid's human. We saw this kid last year as a freewheeling gunslinger and look infallible. He looked tremendous in when Quinn Ewers went down last year and he had to start a few games. He looked great. He looked comfortable. He looked relaxed. Well, that first game against Ohio State, it did not look, it was anything but relaxed. And give Matt Patricia and the Buckeyes a ton of credit. They did some diabolical stuff with that defense and with Caleb Downs. They used some of the old New England Patriots stuff. And to give you a better example, North Carolina in their first game of the season against TCU, Bill Belichick used the exact same defensive scheme. And you know what we learned? 5 stars are a lot better than 3 stars. Yeah. And so Arch, that expectation went onto his shoulders. And let me tell you, nobody puts more on himself than that kid. He understood. Look, he gets where his name is. That's why he's so – it's almost off-putting when people want to take a picture or get autographs because he feels like he doesn't deserve it. He's like, why? I haven't done anything. Why are these people – he's very unassuming. And I think that's part of the allure. I think that's why these players will run through a wall for that kid. Like the happiest that locker room has been was post Sam because they saw how happy Arch was. His juice, our man Drew Kelson at InsideTexas.com tweeted it best. He said, Arch is going to have to bring that juice every single Saturday because that is what is awakening this program. When you've seen Texas kind of look like they're going through the motions, a little sluggish against a UTEP team, against a San Jose State team, it all tied into that. And so I think Arch for the first time kind of just went out there and grip it, rip it, and had fun with it. First couple passes looked pretty bad. After that, that dude was throwing nothing but arrows. I've seen this kid throwing a football for 6 years now. He can spin it, guys, and he's got a deep ball, and he can throw it accurately. It's between his ears. And sometimes the game has to slow down for you. I love what Chase Daniels said, and I'll digress. I love what Chase Daniels said. Paralysis by analysis. This kid was overthinking the room. He was overthinking the plays. He was overthinking his steps. He was overthinking everything. And it's because he puts so much on himself. And I think that's why he's so endeared by his players and the coaches. You thought Sark was going to take a shot at Arch after bad games? No. Matt Brown said it best. When they're down, you got to love on them. You got to bring them up. When they're up, you got to stay on them so they can keep that edge. But when they're down, you got to love on them. They did that with Arch. They did that with some of the other offensive components. Let's see how that looks in 2 weeks in Gainesville.
Hey, you're listening, or you're talking to 2 guys that are covering a program where you want to talk about quarterback attitude and what it does for the morale and culture of your team. Look at what Tommy Castellanos did.
Or Jordan Travis.
And Jordan Travis, too.
God, just not TJU.
But not yeah. Well, I mean, the point, I mean, you have Tommy Castellanos calling out Alabama and then butt kicking them by 2 touchdowns as opposed to what I would liken to a wet dish rag in DJ Uyunglele, who no matter for better or for worse, and there were times where it was good, times where it was bad, but just the same stone cold face, no juice. I'm a big juice guy when it comes to my players, and especially my quarterback. So, hey, you heard it from Justin here. Maybe that juice is coming for Arch Manning. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today about a couple of these agreements. We'll have to have you back on again in the near future. But thank you again for your expertise, and it's been a very insightful conversation, so thank you.
Man, I can't thank you enough. Matt, thank you so much for reaching out. I love getting to know guys on our team and building those relationships and helping each other out in these recruitments because Lord knows that we need it now more than ever. I appreciate you a ton. Call me anytime. Nothing but love.
Thank you so much once again to Justin Wells with Inside Texas for joining the program. And, of course, we've thanked Blake Alderman of Gators Online profusely, but he was great. It was a great interview, Matt. We'll thank him once more. And last but not least, the list of people to thank is nice and long here on the Warpath. Thank you for continuing to watch and support the Warpath. We will be back next Friday, which it's going to be a big one, Matt. We've kind of been leading up and building up, and everything is going as planned. If Florida State takes care of business against Virginia later tonight, we're going to have a top 10 showdown in Doak Campbell Stadium that following Saturday, and it is going to be electric for recruiting. I can't wait to talk about all of that, not only with Matt, but with you guys as well. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all of those things. Tell us what you think in the comment section below. Once again, we'll see you next Friday. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer for theosceola.com. with Matt Lasser.
Yep, and hey, if you're a New York City person, I might be at Wicked Willie's. Reminder. So if I'm at Wicked Willie's for the game, say hi.
Yeah, Matt Lasser, recruiting writer for Warchant, who's going to be at in New York, so you can go and pester him about Florida State recruiting. We'll see you all next Friday.